Good morning. Over the last few days we have been graphing quadratic functions, figuring out where do they cross the x-axis. Today we're going to be doing the same thing, but in a very shortcut way. We're going to use square roots to solve the quadratic equations. In the past, for example, we've had like y equals ax squared, or even plus c. And normally when we solve this, it would be like 0 equals ax squared plus c, because we're figuring out where is it reaching the y-axis at 0. We're going to actually solve this for x squared today. So instead of making a table to graph like we have, we're going to solve this to try and get x by itself. So we're going to have to like subtract c, whatever number that is. So we have negative c equals ax squared, divide by a. This is a really quick version, whatever these numbers are. And we have that equals x squared. Well, we don't want x squared, we want to figure out what is just x. So the opposite of a square, remember, power of 2 is the square root. So we would have to take the square root of both sides. This is what we're going to be doing today to figure out how many solutions are there, or how many times does our parabola cross the x-axis. If your parabola does not cross the x-axis, there's going to be no solution. If it crosses the x-axis only at one point, that's when we simply have one solution. Or if it crosses the x-axis at 2 points, then it has two solutions. So here it says if d is greater than 0, then x squared equals d has two solutions. Right here, x squared equal to this whole thing, they just use the letter d to represent that instead of negative c over a. So if you have a number here, d, if it is greater than 0, like 4, well, we know we can take the square root on both sides. The square root of 4 is 2. So this is something, if you have a number that's greater than 0, you'll have two solutions. If it's less than 0, you'll have no solution. If it's equal to 0, you'll have one solution. Now, this is all arbitrary right now. Let's solve a couple, and this will hopefully make a little bit more sense. So I want to figure out what is x. So first, the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. So then we just have x squared equal to 4. Now, there's two ways of thinking about this. You could think, what could I plug in here for x in order to get 4? Or just undo the square and get the square root. Use the square root. I'm going to start by using the square root. Square root and the square, oopsies, are opposite of each other, and we get x equals the square root of 4, which is just 2. However, we were told right back here that if d is greater than 0, there are two solutions. D right here is greater than 0, 4. There are two solutions. Positive 2 is an answer, but also negative 2. Because back here, when we just had x squared, x, this whole piece could have been a negative 2, because negative 2 times negative 2 also gives us 4. So whenever you take the square root, you could have a positive answer or a negative answer. So if you want to write it out separately, you can. If you want to use the plus and minus symbol to represent one positive and one negative, you can as well. So let's solve the next one. Get rid of adding and subtracting first, just like our regular equations. Those eliminate. We have m squared equal to, those give us 0. And now you can think, what could I plug in here for m to give me 0? Or do the opposite of square and take the square root? Well, square root and a square will cancel. Square root of 0 is just 0. There's no such thing as positive 0 or negative 0. This is just one solution. It's going to cross the x-axis at 0. So our graph or parabola might look something like that. This one back here crosses at negative 2 and positive 2. So this graph might look something, oopsies, that was a little off, like that. Alright, let's keep going. So I'm going to subtract 12. Those eliminate. We have b squared equal to a negative 7. Now, let me think for a second. Any number I plug in here for b and then square it, is that ever going to give me a negative number? Even if I put a negative number in here, let's say I put in negative 2. Well, a negative 2 squared is going to multiply that negative 2 times and make a positive. So there's no way for me to get a negative number. Our answer is simply no solution. That's our example back here. If it's less than 0, meaning it's a negative number, there's no solution. Because we can't take the square root of a negative number. Your calculator will tell you error. Let's try a couple more, figure out how many solutions are there. Alright, first we need to get rid of this multiplication. I'm going to divide by 25. We have x squared equals 16 over 25. Now this page is focusing on fractions, taking the square root of a fraction. It's a little bit difficult to think what multiplied by itself is going to give us this. So I'm going to undo the square and take the square root. So those will cancel. Remember, when we take the square root, we could have a positive answer or a negative answer, just like, oops, too far. Back here, we could have plugged in a negative 2 or a positive 2, and it would have given us 4. If we have the square root of a fraction, it's really the square root of the numerator and the square root of the denominator. Oops, 25. So the square root of 16 is really just 4. The square root of 25 is really just 5. So our answer, we could have a positive 4/5 or a negative 4/5. If you want to plug it back in to double check your work, you can. Just make sure you put that number in parentheses and do the exponent first. Alright, getting more complex now. We want to get the letter n all by itself, so get rid of addition and subtraction. I'm going to subtract 61. We have negative 3n squared. These are all negatives. So adding these up, same sign, 75. And then the opposite of multiplying is divide. We're going to divide by a negative 3. Two negatives here make a positive. 75 divided by 3, think of quarters. 75 cents divided by 3 is 25 cents. Now, what could you plug in here for n? What number by itself, multiplied by itself, would give you 25? Well, I know 5 times 5 is 25, and I also know negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. So if you know that, go ahead and write those down. Otherwise, if you want to take the square root to undo the square, that will work just fine as well. Just know that there are two answers, positive and negative 5. Alright, I would like you to try this one on your own, and then turn and talk to a neighbor, see if you got the same answer. Hopefully you subtracted 12 first and got a negative 20. And then divide by 5. We get w squared equal to negative 4. And then last, to get rid of the square, we take the square root. Those eliminate, but we can't take the square root of a negative number, so this one is no solution. What these mean again, you guys, is that this graph just won't be touching the x-axis. There's no spot where it's going to touch the x-axis. This one would cross at negative 5 and positive 5. So your parabola might look something like that. This one, same thing. Positive 4/5 and negative 4/5. Your graph might look something like that. Alright, this one is the same, however, they're not going to be the nicest answers. It says round your solution to the nearest hundredth if necessary. Hundredth, remember, is 2 spots after the decimal. This would be tenth and then the hundredth. So let's go ahead and get x squared all by itself. Get rid of addition and subtraction first. You guys should be really good at solving equations by now. We've been doing this all year. 11 plus 7 is 18. And then the opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. And then 18 divided by 3 is 6. So last step, get rid of the square, we take the square root. I'm going to tell you right now, on your next test, I guarantee someone's going to forget to put the plus and the minus, and you're going to get a point off. Because there are two answers. The negative and the positive answer, because a negative times a negative will make a positive. I don't know what the square root of 6 is, so let's plug it in. We have square root, remember that's the yellow one here. So we want second square root of 6, which is really 2.449. We want 2 decimal places, nearest hundredth. So 2.44. Since the next number is higher than 5, we round that to 2.45. 2.45. Alright, let's keep going. This one, subtract 4 on both sides. And we just have x squared equal to 10. And then get rid of the square root, or get rid of the square by taking the square root. We get x equal to plus or minus whatever the square root of 10 is. So second square root of 10, we get 3.162. 2 is less than 5, so leave it at 3.16. This next one I would like you to try on your own, and then click play to see if you got it right. First, I'm going to get rid of adding and subtracting. I'm going to add 1. So we have 3k squared equal to 1. And then divide by 3 on both sides. We get k squared equal to a third, which is fine. We can take the square root of a third. So we have k is plus or minus, again, square root of that number could be positive, could be a negative multiplied by negative to make a positive. And I need to plug that in my calculator. I have no idea what the square root of 1/3 is. Remember, to put a fraction in your calculator, just do 1 divided by 3. Choose division. We get about 5.77, or if we round that up, 0.58. 58 hundredths. If you have questions or need some more time, please make sure you're pausing the video to check your work and make sure you are on the right track. Alright, here's a couple more, but again, just getting more complex problems like this. Middle one has a lot more going on. We might need to combine some like terms. So right here, start with this one, just subtract 12. We want x squared by itself. We have negative x squared equal to now just 5. Now this is a negative 1, so the opposite of multiplying is dividing by negative 1. So we have x squared equal to a negative 5. And then if we take the square root, can't quite take the square root of a negative number, you guys. If we try and plug it in our calculator, let's see what happens. The square root of negative 5, error. It says non-real answer, because there is no answer. There is no solution. This is not going to cross the x-axis. Alright, next we want all the x's on the same side. I'm going to move this smaller one, subtract them over to be together on the same side. That way we don't have any negatives on there as well, so those eliminated. We have now 5x squared minus 34 equal to 16. Get rid of this 34, I'm going to add 34. Remember, our goal is to get the x by itself. So we have 5x squared. And then adding these, 6 plus 4 is 10. 3, 4, 5, we have 50. And then divide by 5, we'll get a nicer answer here. 10. And then last, the opposite of a square. To undo that, we take the square root. So those will cancel. And we want the square root of 10. So second square root of 10. We have 3.16. And I guarantee you, someone's going to write this. But this is wrong, because that's only one answer. We need two answers, plus or minus 3.16. Because if you put a negative 3.16 back in here for x and squared it, a negative times a negative would make a positive. It would give you 10. Alright, this next one, a little bit more complex. There are two ways we could do this. We could draw our box and multiply x plus 2 by x plus 2, but there's an easier way to do this. We learned back here, well, we learned this earlier actually too, but to get rid of the squared, we take the square root. So if we want to get rid of this squared right away, we can, because this is all that's on that side. So I'm just going to take the square root of both sides. But remember, when you take the square root, we have a positive answer or a negative answer. So our square root and our square cancel, and we have x plus 2 equal to either the positive or the negative square root of 10. I'm not going to evaluate that yet. I'm going to wait and plug the whole thing into my calculator in a second. So now I could have two answers. I'm going to first get x by itself, so I'm going to subtract 2. So we have x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 10. So we have two answers here. We have x could equal negative 2 plus the square root of 10, or x could be negative 2 minus the square root of 10. Just like here, we have one positive and one negative. Same thing here, one positive, one negative. So let's plug those into my calculator to figure out what are my two answers. First, I'm going to have negative 2 plus the square root of 10. That gives me about 1.16. Or we can do the same thing, negative 2 minus the square root. Oops, that's not square root. Go back. Square root of 10. Negative 5.16. So those would be my two answers. This is where my graph would cross the x-axis if I were to graph it at 1 point something and at like negative 5. Let's try two more just like that one. The only thing you need to be careful though is that the squared is by itself here. This one has multiplied by 6, so first we need to divide by 6 to get rid of that. So we have x minus 4 squared, and 42 divided by 6, well, 6 times 7 is 42. Now we can get rid of the square by taking the square root. So those will cancel and leave us with x minus 4 equal to a positive or a negative square root of 7. And we want x by itself, so we're just going to add 4. You can't add 4 plus the square root of 7 because this 4 is not under the square root. So we have 4 plus or minus the square root of 7. So my two answers, we have 4 plus the square root of 7, and we have 4 minus the square root of 7. I'm just going to plug these in my calculator to figure out what are my two answers. So we have 4 plus the square root of 7 is 6.65 if we round up. And then same thing but with a negative, 4 minus the square root of 7 be 1.35. And it's okay if these answers aren't anything near each other, because our graph could cross the x-axis at any point. I would like you to try this one on your own and then click play to see if you got it right, or check with a neighbor first. So first we need x, or the squared all by itself, so we get rid of this 3. I'm going to divide by 3. We have t plus 5 squared equal to 24 over 3. Let me see if that's a nice number. 24 divided by 3. There we go, it's 8. I don't know why I didn't do that in my head. Silly me. 8 times 3 is 24. And then we need to get rid of the squared. We take the square root. So those will cancel and leave us with t plus 5 equal to plus or minus, don't forget that, the square root of 8. And we want t by itself, so I'm going to subtract 5. So we have t is negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 8. So just like before, this 4 didn't change. Still positive 4 both times. The only thing that changes is the positive square root of 7 or the negative square root of 7. In this case, we have negative 5 plus the square root of 8, and we have negative 5 minus the square root of 8. The 5 is negative both times. So let's plug this in to see what are our two answers. So first we have negative 5. I'm going to do plus the square root of 8 is negative 2.17. And then negative 5 minus the square root of 8 is negative 7.83 if we round it. Oops, negative, what was it? I already forgot. 7.83. So this is where our graph would cross our x-axis at negative 2 and way over here at negative 7. Might look something like that. Alright, last question. Still using squares to solve this problem. It says use the given area A. So our area is this whole piece right here. M squared is meters squared. That's our units. We don't really need that. So our area is just 21 pi. Use the area of the circle to find the radius or the diameter. So if we find one, it'll be really easy to find the other because the radius is only half of the diameter, and round to the nearest hundredth. Well, to find the area of a circle, we have the equation pi r squared. That will give us the area of a circle. We know the area is 21 pi, however. So we need to use this to find, first, the radius. So again, all I did was took the equation for the area of a circle, pi r squared, and plugged in. We know this area is really 21, so I plugged that in. Now if we want r by itself, I'm going to get rid of pi. I'm going to divide by pi. Pi over pi is just like 4 over 4, or 2 over 2. It's really just 1. So those eliminate. 21 times 1 is still 21. And then we just have 21 equals r squared. So let's get rid of the squared by taking the square root. Could be a plus or a minus the square root of 21. So the square root of 21 is 4.58. But you guys, can we have a length that's negative? No. So our answer is just a positive 4. I'm just going to erase this here. It's only the positive 4.58. That is the radius. If you wanted to find the diameter, diameter would be all the way across. We would just multiply it by 2 times 2, and we get 9.16. That would equal the diameter. I believe there's one question in your homework that has to do with something like this. You will need the equation for the area of a circle, which is pi r squared. Then plug in the area that they give you. Alright, your homework is a book assignment. Again, I know this is our last chapter. 10.4, page 55. All of these, we're not doing odds today. I'm sorry, you guys. You can do these. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck.